Everyone, I hope you're all having a fantastic day. Today I wanted to get on and talk about toxic relationships and red flags. And the reason I wanted to talk about this is because it's important to recognize that not everyone has the same red flags, right? So we can agree on some basic ones, obviously, anything to do with verbal, physical, mental abuse. But then beyond that, what's a red flag for you might not be a red flag for me. So, for instance, I just want to tell you a story about a time when Donnie and I were really young. We had just started dating, and we were out to eat at a restaurant that we frequented often, and we knew the server. Okay, so just to create that context, and when the server came over to ask us what we wanted to order, we both placed our order. And when I gave mine, Donnie said, "Are you sure you want to order that? Maybe you should order the smaller one." And immediately the server jumped in and was like, or no, I don't even know if she said anything in the moment. But then I think it was later. Later, she said to me privately, that was really condescending of him and controlling for him to try to control what you order. Like don't ever let a man tell you what to order in a restaurant. You order what you want, right? And I kind of laughed and I was like, thank you. I do appreciate what you're trying to do. You're trying to protect me and I understand that. However, we had had a previous conversation the last time we were in and I ordered some food and it was too much. And I actually said to him, "Hey, if we're ever here again and I order this, remind me that it was too much food." And I had forgotten that conversation. And then I, of course, just sort of was automatically ordering what I might normally order somewhere else. Based on sizing. And he was just reminding me that, the serving sizes here are bigger than what you would normally get, right? So he was actually being very caring and had remembered something that I had said. So, kudos to him for that because, yeah, so that's the thing. So from the outside looking in, that looked like really controlling and condescending behavior, right? And from a feminist perspective, it would be easy to understand like why you would get your hackles up if you witnessed that interchange. So it's important to understand that we also might have friends who, when we talk about various, things that are coming up in a relationship, that they might automatically be like, "Oh, that's a red flag," and "Oh, you should walk away," and they might have some advice. But the reality is that a red flag really is about how that other person makes you feel. Okay, so a red flag from me might not be the same as a red flag for you based on past experiences. So if you're with someone and because of your upbringing or maybe previous relationships, something that they do triggers something inside of you that's really, unsettling, upsetting, and creates some instability within you, then that's the red flag, right? And that thing that they do might not be an issue for me because, I'm just, I'm trying to think. I know one of my clients, when she first started dating her spouse grew up in a family that didn't really make a big deal about birthday celebrations and whatnot. And it just was not, something that they really put a lot of attention on. So, on that day, maybe they get a little gift and maybe, a special meal, but it wasn't a big deal. But in her family, in her upbringing, every birthday was a huge celebration. It was a huge gathering. All the family came and there was usually something extra special about the day. And the person whose birthday it was were made to feel very special. And so when she got into this relationship with her husband, at first she started to think that he just didn't care enough about her. And, even when she would voice these, obviously, like after the first birthday went by and things weren't great, she started to voice, like, this is what I want, this is what I need, this is what I'm used to, this is something that I expect in my relationship. And, and she did say, like, there was times when he was really trying, and, often was, not hitting the mark, right? But she could see that he was at least trying, but she really didn't understand until they had a really deep conversation about it, that he just didn't look at it the same way, right? And she could have very easily have looked at that and considered that a red flag. In fact, some of her girlfriends had even said to her, like, this is not the guy for you. And, that may be an indication of other things, but in this particular case and in this particular relationship and with him specifically, it wasn't necessarily a general, like, not caring or unwillingness to show love and affection or even give gifts, because she then went on to say, it sort of came to her that, yeah, he doesn't make a big deal about birthdays, but there's so many other ways that he shows me that he loves me, even in gifts, just not necessarily on my birthday. And so, like, when he would travel, he would come home with little thoughtful things that he had bought thinking of her, things like that, right? So that's sort of like that conversation around it, and what it was bringing up for her actually, sort of gave her some insight. But then there was other things that we came to recognize through, like through our conversation, that actually were triggering something deeper inside of her. And so, and those things we had to sort of, work through, right? So, but like, so sometimes we can apply logic to things, and sometimes we need to apply curiosity. But the reason why I bring this up and why boundaries are so important, and I've talked about this in previous videos, and why that introspection is so important, and why recognizing our triggers is so important, is then when we all have all of that kind of knowledge about ourselves, we then can have productive conversations around things that we might perceive as red flags. So if you're dating someone who has a different way of showing affection, the conversation that you have around that for you and what it triggers for you is more indicative of who they are, their reaction and their behaviors within that conversation are maybe more of a red flag than the actual thing that you're bringing up. So what I mean by that is, you might think that they're not giving gifts is a red flag, but then what you come to understand through conversation and curiosity is that they really struggle to show any kind of emotion, right? And they shut down when confronted with these kind of conversations of, like, hey, this bothers me, or hey, this is something that's important to me, and so I thought you should know. And if their reaction is to shut down and to, push away, or to get defensive or reactive in some way, or to put it back on you, or to gaslight you in some way, then that's the red flag, right? And so there's the things that trigger us. But if we've come to recognize our triggers and we're working on them, then we can recognize that maybe the things that they're doing aren't necessarily they're not intentional, right? So some things aren't intentional, some things, and just to be clear, like, we all have red flags, right? So if I was out there and I was single and I was, meeting people and dating people, there would be things that I'm sure that I would do that would trigger some sort of reaction in someone else, right? Maybe it would be, I remind them of a previous relationship, or I remind them of a parent, right? The mother or whatever. Like, if I'm triggering something inside of someone else, then that's their red flag of me. And that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm unlovable, but if that person says something to me like, hey, did you know that, this is something that you do, and that, some people, and myself, take it kind of this way and it hurts or whatever. Like, and if then I react like, oh my God, no, like you're wrong, or it's not an issue or whatever. If I just blow you off, or I say, I don't want to have this conversation, or, just stop calling them or whatever, then, that's something that I would need to work on. That's my things that I need to go and do, right? So that's how I just wanted to kind of touch on that. I know that, it's really challenging when you're newly, or it's like if you're single and you've been in a toxic relationship, to sort of put yourself out there in the dating world again and know, what are red flags. And that's really where the introspection work can really help, to sort of dig deep, kind of figure out where you're at, what triggers you, what could be a red flag for you specifically, right? Because there's some generic ones, but then there's some that are just specific to you, and you want to know that, right? Because often we get caught in those loops and those patterns because we don't recognize what's being triggered inside of us. It just might feel like it's known. Maybe it's comfortable because we know it, we've experienced it before, and we don't necessarily see the pattern, right? We don't recognize that we are being triggered sometimes, right? So that's important too. So if I can help with any of this, please feel free to reach out, private message me, put a little note in the comments, share your insights. I actually posted earlier the question on my Facebook feed. Has an ex ever made you feel a certain way about you and your attractiveness, or made you feel unattractive or unworthy, unlovable? And I put that out there because I want to know what's at play here is the fact that they often know, once you're in a relationship with these people, they know what your triggers are, even if you don't, right? They see your reactions to certain things, right? So knowing your triggers can really help you to avoid having other people try to tell you, about things that you know to be true about you, about the fact that you're lovable and that you're beautiful just the way you are. And, that we all need to grow and evolve and put ourselves in a position where, excuse me, we're looking after ourselves and everything. That's for sure. However, when we're living in a place of being really self-confident and strong in our self-love, then no matter what the other person says, they're not going to be able to trigger that feeling of unlovable, and that there's something wrong with us, right? They're just not going to be able to do that, right? So that's where doing that introspection work comes in, and that's where getting to know yourself, knowing what your triggers are, and then knowing how to recognize red flags for you. So I hope this helps. Take care. Have a great day. Namaste.